happy with it, honestly.
Being as we're live on Facebook, we probably should use our personal stuff a little bit more, Albert? So we can link. But anyway, we're live on Facebook at the What's On at Elephant and Castle Facebook page. Joining me today is Albert Azis-Clauson, who I met a few weeks ago, and I'm really excited to talk to him today because he's just full of energy, and I know some really great insights for startups and for freelancers. But also, Albert, I want to get into your dancing career and your energy. I saw you shine briefly, as you were introducing the networking event that we were at. So you've got great character, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. Thanks for joining me.
My absolute pleasure. It's very exciting to be here.
Awesome. How you been? Tell me what you just told me about the round of funding.
Yeah, so we just closed another round of funding, which was kind of like an intermediate round of circa £600,000, which is very exciting, which brings our total in this company to 2.5 million, which is exciting. And also I was saying just before we got on that there was a weird thing in this round that the British government are now an investor in UnderPinned, which is really strange, which is just because during COVID, they set up a support fund basically, and we became eligible for it. So we've now on our cap table have the British government, which is really strange.
That's amazing. Albert, how did let's talk about UnderPinned, which is the company that you mentioned in your profile. It's now valued around 12 million pounds. You've had several rounds of funding. Can you explain to people what it is?
Yeah, so really simply, UnderPinned teaches people how to freelance and then gives them all the tools they need to freelance. The core concept being, no one has ever left education or employment really feeling confident about starting their freelance journey, no matter how good they are at their craft. And before UnderPinned, I'd met thousands of these people who were amazing at what they did, but just didn't really understand how to build something around it. And so what ended up happening is people end up floundering around, and there's lots of fumbling and trial and error. And UnderPinned basically just removes all of that. It kind of advances you on your journey about 3 years ahead and gets rid of all that learning, because we have an accelerator program where you learn everything you need to know about freelancing, and then a software system that does everything from lead generation and portfolio development to invoicing, contracts and project management, insurance and accounting. So everything you need to build a business around a craft in one place under one subscription.
So I'm wondering, like with the last 2 years, the way it's been, what's been the uptake in people's interest in becoming freelance?
So this is really interesting. I'm sorry, this is going to be very slightly long-winded, but basically for the last kind of 10 years, there's been this amazing and really interesting trend that I've called the agency trend, which is basically when you go and hire a marketing agency, branding agency, product agency, whatever it is, you don't hire the mid or junior level staff. You go in and have a conversation with the 3 directors that have done 25 years of experience each, in-house, out-house, whatever it is. And they're the people that convince you to hire their agency. They then delegate the whole project to their teams, right? And they probably don't touch it. In some cases they do, and I don't want to badmouth some. It depends on the kind of the setup. But by and large, they had it down to a team. And agencies started to realize about 10 years ago that it didn't make any sense that they had full-time teams, because the full-time teams would sit there and would limit the kinds of clients that they could have, basically, because they had specialisms. And so they started to realize that instead of having these permanent teams, they could build teams for specific clients using freelancers. And when you think about it, it makes sense. It's more efficient. You only have them when you need them. They're exactly the right person for the job. And they're not the reason that they're hiring the company anyway. So the brand of the company and the persona stays the same. So this trend started to grow quite a lot. Now, the biggest barrier to this kind of way of working is most companies don't feel very confident interacting with freelancers. They definitely don't know where to find them. The general places you go to find freelancers on freelance marketplaces, the quality tends to be a bit questionable, or it's difficult to know how to kind of vet them before they come in. So the agencies that were doing this were ones that were building their own networks of freelancing. Anyway, fast forward, COVID happens. 2 massive things happen. 1, everyone's sitting at home going, what am I supposed to do with my time? I'm going to see if I can turn my hobby into a side hustle, my side hustle into a full-time thing. I'm going to work on my own projects. I don't want to go into the office anymore. I like the fact that I can take a 2-hour lunch because that makes sense for my way of my work. The way that people have attitudes towards working have changed totally, and much faster than they would have previously. And whereas in 2008, you get a rise of freelancing because people are forced into economic situations that require them to look at freelancing. In this kind of bout of terrible economic volatility, what happened instead was people started to go, I'm excited about taking up projects. I'm excited about my side hustle. I'm excited about using my creative thinking and creative problem solving. And then, so you get this massive surge of people wanting to work in this freelance format, even if not explicitly as freelancers. And on the other side, you have this increased requirement for critical thinking and creative thinking, because automation has replaced a lot of administrative tasks that junior employees did. But the people who were traditionally junior employees are now so well educated and have so much experience that they can come in and fulfill these really exciting roles as freelancers. So that's happening. Then you get companies going, we furloughed loads of our staff, or we fired staff, but we still need to be doing work. So we're going to hire people on a freelance basis. And finally, which I think is probably the most important trend long term, is the mass adoption of communication technology in a 6-month period. So whereas previously the primary format for communication was in-person communication and the secondary was digital, it's completely reversed. The primary format for communication is now digital and the secondary is in-person. What that means is companies that previously wouldn't know how to drop someone into a project management process or drop someone into a meeting can suddenly go, it's literally a matter of giving them access codes to the right place in the right time. So we forced companies into adopting this digital first format for communication and project management, which previously they've been really uncomfortable doing. So what it's meant is companies now want to have more efficient teams, have the ability to drop people in as and when they want, which they didn't have previously, and have now a renewed or new rather massive appetite for using freelancers to improve their businesses. This led to, at the height of the pandemic, a 40% increase in freelance job listings compared to every other aspect of the economy shrinking. So, except for digital e-commerce, and there's a few other specific examples, but there's this huge surge from a push perspective of people wanting to freelance and a pull perspective of businesses wanting to use freelancers. And it's led to this massive boom in new people freelancing. And so for UnderPinned, it was a weird thing to navigate in that, on the one hand, we wanted to be very conscientious and supportive and empathetic to our audience who were struggling. And therefore, we made most of our products completely free. We produced a lot of grants for people. And we did a lot of campaigns around government policy for support, particularly in the UK. But on the other hand, it's been a kind of golden ticket for us in that we're now 3 years ahead of our nearest competitor who's sprung out of this new opportunity, which puts us in this amazing position to go, hey, well, you're learning how this economy works because it's a relatively new thing, the skilled freelance space. We've been doing this for 3 years and we're the experts. So it's been a kind of amazing roller coaster that's been terrifying but ultimately really exciting.
How does your business work?
Good question. It doesn't really. It's just an idea. So it's a really simple business model. Accelerator program, subscription. So the common problem in our market in terms of accessing the freelance economy is that the only people that are traditionally valuable are very established freelancers, right? If you're earning 60K a year, it makes sense that you're spending 1.5K on accounting and £500 on your banking system and £400 on your project management system, because it's a relatively small proportion of your revenue for your freelance business. Now, the problem arises in that the established freelance economy is relatively small proportionately. It's 2.2 million people in the UK, for example. But there are 12.5 million people with side hustles and a further 10 million in the aspirational category who are looking at freelancing or graduating or fall in some other category. What that means is there is a much bigger market of people who are trying to make the move or thinking about it than there are who have done it. Now, the issue is most companies in this space work in the finance sector or kind of like high-level project management sector, and they target these established freelancers because there's obvious value and inherent value that already exists. So like, I want a slice of the pie. If SaaS companies who work on a subscription model try and attack the earlier stage freelance market, what ends up happening is they go, well, loads of these people only stay for 3 months. Loads of these people go and get a full-time job or go and start a bigger business or stop being relevant to us in some other way. What that means is they're a higher risk category and therefore no one's been targeting them. So one of the first hurdles we had to overcome from a business model perspective is, how can we make our interaction with earlier stage, higher risk customers from a commercial perspective valuable for both sides? And that's where our accelerator program comes in the same way that if you're doing a startup, you might go and do an accelerator program with a seed fund or whatever else it is. Very similarly, we do an accelerator program. Our accelerator program lasts 8 weeks. It costs £200, which is very cheap compared to like nearest things in this space. But what it does for us, and the reason we're able to make it that cheap, is that when we acquire a user from a commercial perspective, we have to get enough from them to let us invest back into them. With a £200 ticket, what that allows us to do is from the first day, they're a commercially valuable customer. So we already make a profit from them on the first day, even though it's very, very small, which means that we're not then worried about trying to force them into a subscription. We're worried about delivering the value that they then paid for. So step one is we get people, we produce a lot of content, which creates warm audiences, gets people to know our brand. Then we introduce them to the accelerator program with events not dissimilar from this, or we introduce UnderPinned and the core kind of concepts behind being a successful freelancer. And then people buy the course, and people love the course, and I get really engaged with it and meet lots of other freelancers. They become part of our community. They learn how to freelance through the course. And in each module, you actually have to use, like, you will have sent your first invoice, contract, done project management, found your first client by the end of the course. So then when you finish the course, if you're still not ready to be a subscriber and you don't think freelancing is for you, we haven't made a loss by investing our time in you. But if you do, everything's there and ready to go. So what it means is we can invest in a much earlier stage of freelancer because of this system. Once you come out of it, then we do, the system allows you to do everything from insurance and helplines, masterclasses, the more softer side of things, to project management, portfolio development, invoicing, and contracts. And currently it's only £5 a month. So you go through this £200 intensive 8-week course, which is live aspects as well as on-demand aspects. And then you're converted into this £5 a month subscription where you continue to get access to everything you need to build your business.
Beautiful. I'm really shocked that there's only 2.5 million freelancers in the UK.
So this is a really interesting point, right? Because there's 4.85 million self-employed people, of which 2.2 million fall into the freelance category, which I believe is defined as sole traders who operate in a freelance format. Now, it's a pretty terrible demarcating criteria because it excludes anyone who's got a limited company and operates as a freelancer. It also excludes anyone whose main job is not freelancing. But the thing that's really interesting is it sounds like a small number, but it's growing so quickly. And when I say there's 12.5 million people with a side hustle, all of those are people who you might, when you meet, describe themselves as freelancers. I think there's a very common thing of, particularly for younger people or people still at university or still in education or having recently moved into the world of work, where it's like, well, actually I work in a coffee shop or in hospitality or work in XYZ, but I do this freelancing thing on the side. And those people are not counted. They're also not counted if they're in their first year. So that number is going to jump dramatically next April with the next end of the next financial year, because everybody in COVID that started that journey is then going to register for the first time at that point.
Right. I was trying to think about it, and I told you I'm 50 years old, and I think that I don't know if I've ever had, maybe when I was really young, had a company give me a PAYE slip, so I don't even know the language around it. I've always worked for myself or been, a freelance self-employed person where I would invoice a company and they would pay me directly. I would take care of my own taxes, and I've really loved it. It's been to me, it's just been freedom. So I've had guys who are close friends of mine who work in banks, and they get their regular paycheck and they get their insurance and they get everything. And they're like, Nick, I could never do what you do because I need the security. Do you think that it takes a certain type of individual to say, I want to be a freelancer, or I want to work in that kind of typical 9-to-5 PAYE system?
So there's like a broader point here around the way that the workforce is changing, whether you like it or not. And then there's the more specific question, or more specifically what you're asking, which is like, who are the kinds of people that approach this? And I think that in my experience, the biggest attribute that's lacking in people that start this journey is thinking about themselves as a business. This is particularly true in the creative sector, but true more broadly. And what I find is a particularly common theme is that people enter the world of the world of freelancing with an amazing skill, like a craft, something they're really good at, whether it's banking or financial advisory or graphic design. But that's not going to make them successful at all. In fact, it will likely be a really big problem for them because the quality of your skill does not denote the success of your business. And I think, like, if you look at the history of technology, there's loads of famous examples about like Betamax and VHS, and although that pretty much fell down to the adoption of porn, like it's not necessarily the best product, the best skill that wins. It's the best communication of that skill, the best value deliverer, the best organizer, the best, network builder. And so I don't know if it's necessarily that you need to be a certain type of person. I don't think that there are barriers to entry for anyone. I think if you're willing to learn these things, anyone can, if they're not that complicated. But the thing that I think the biggest stopping point is, are you willing to take on this role of running a business, which the moment you leave full-time employment, you have to do if you want to be successful. You cannot continue to sit as an employee doing graphic design really well if you want to build a freelance practice. It just won't happen. And so I think that there are people who are innately, or not innately, there are people who have their context has meant that they are more likely to already understand and engage with that side of things, or people whose upbringing or the way that they've worked has made them more, I guess, entrepreneurial and thinking about it as a business and a proposition and a problem solution and how to engage with clients. And that will make them more successful more quickly. I don't think there's anything that will prohibit people from starting, but I do think there needs to be a recognition quite early on in the process that I'm not going to now sell my skills. I'm going to now build a business which is going to sell a solution, which my skills will be a toolkit for clients and customers to solve. And unless you can get over that hurdle, it's very difficult to start building success. The wider point around the changing workforce, I think, is particularly interesting. So the point about security is really important. Currently, being self-employed means you need to take responsibility of your own security. And there isn't a huge amount of policy or infrastructure that will support you in doing that. When you try and get a mortgage, it's going to be an absolute nightmare because financial institutions are not set up to vet self-employed people. I mean, like, hilariously, I had to get my mum to be a guarantor on my flat, despite the fact that I'm the person that gives references for my 20 employees for their flats, because I'm like self-employed by my own company, and they just couldn't do the maths of it. It's like, it doesn't matter how much you earn or what you're doing, like self-employment is volatile. And so there aren't really the frameworks to check that. And it's same from policy. And during COVID, people who were self-employed may well have noticed that their support was absolutely atrocious compared to their full-time employed counterparts, because there just isn't the infrastructure. But as we look at the way the world of work is changing, you might have seen last week, there was a whole load of newspapers which use this awful new word called polyworking, which is basically companies are increasingly in need of specialized workers and less in need of full-time teams. What that means is individuals might not necessarily just be working for one company. And when people go into work, it's much more common now to go and work for 5 different agencies or 5 different companies doing different projects as a freelancer. And I think as we see work continue to progress, the requirement of full-time employment at junior and mid-levels will almost disappear and be replaced with this kind of hybridized flexible workforce where people work as freelancers / flexible employees.
I'm wondering about benefits. So this was, as you were talking about people who want the security of working with certain organizations like larger companies. Can a freelancer establish a business, like a freelance business around themselves as a graphic designer, say, where they can be entitled to, say, you know, the same medical benefits and stuff? Can that work in as a freelance person?
Yeah. So the big difference is you have to take responsibility of it, and there's no legal requirement for you to, right? If you work for a company in the UK, you know you're going to have a pension, you know you're going to have, you know, some level of support, you know you get, you know, paternity, maternity leave, things like that, which you don't as a self-employed person. However, I mean, technically you do, but it's way worse if you're looking at maternity and paternity leave. But if you look at the structures around how to, basically, there are lots of new tech companies that are popping up to try and solve this problem. And if you take the initiative, there are private companies that can help you solve this. Now, I'm fairly left-leaning, and like my view is that the government are going to take a long time to catch up with this, but it is absolutely their responsibility to, and is a requirement of the future. Like, if you want to set up your own security now as a freelancer, you need to go and find companies like Penfold and Collective Benefits, and to name a couple, who help you with exactly the things you're describing: sick pay, ill pay, maternity leave, pensions, insurances, all these things. They exist, but they exist purely in the new tech world of startups. They don't exist in a kind of like normal structure of that you would find if you were in full-time employment. Now, I think that's going to change, again, as I say, slowly. But at the moment it requires initiative, but those things are absolutely out there. And like, so when you join UnderPinned, you know, one of the things is advising you where to go to do all of these things.
Cool. It's amazing, and I love it. I wish I would have had it as a resource for myself years ago, because the one thing, you know, I was really good at doing what I did, but I was really bad at paying taxes. And I shouldn't say this, but I was, you know, like it was just, I ended up paying them, but I ended up, you know, it becoming stressful and that national insurance and always this backlog of stuff because of that thing is that I didn't consider myself a business. I just considered myself as somebody who would just go out and do this job. So yeah, I wish I would have had your resource a few years ago, but how did I don't want to ask how old you are, but you're a lot younger than me, and you got this, you know, this energy around you that you wanted to create this company. What happened in your life where, you know, I know you were a dancer.
Yeah.
What came about in your life from, you know, dancing at, you know, it was ballet, right? At the.
Yeah. So I went to the Royal Ballet School. So I'm 25. Yeah. So I went to the Royal Ballet School. Which is a weird place. I mean, it's not dissimilar from you and hockey, right? Like it's a very, like when you grow up in that environment, it's very narrow, it's very disciplined, it's very stressful, and it's very abnormal. But you don't realize it's abnormal when you're in it because it's normal to you, right? So I grew up doing ballet. I went to the Royal Ballet School, you know, 4 to 8 hours of ballet a day, plus your normal schoolwork and stuff. And then I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And the reason for that is when you're in that tunnel, if there are windows and you can see what's going on outside the tunnel, you start to be like, I want to go and do that thing. And I have a very inquisitive mind. I remember my mum saying when I was a kid, our school was 20 minutes away and it would take 4 hours to get there because I would stop and ask what every single thing asked was, right? Yeah. And that's exactly how I was when I was at ballet school. So I loved ballet and I loved the discipline and I loved being in the class. And I loved everything about it. But the moment I'd look out of the window, I'd be like, but what about that? Like, I want to go and touch that thing. I want to go and try that thing. And because you start so narrow so early, you have no idea what's going on the other side of that wall. So I wanted to go and try those things. So I quit ballet and I stopped like cold turkey. I didn't do another class. I mean, I've done like 1 or 2 since. I've danced occasionally and done a few music videos and stuff like quite recently actually, but I'm not a dancer anymore. And I went and I did in sports world, rugby, football, parkour, every athletics event you could do from sprinting to pole vault and high jump and shot put. I did climbing, swimming, kung fu, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, boxing, MMA, like every single thing I could try, water polo, like everything I could try, I'd do it for 6 months and get pretty good at it. Like I would do everything. And because of ballet, I had a great like physical foundation to go and try all these things. From an academic and intellectual perspective, I went into school and I remember thinking, wait, school is 9 till 3? What do you do with the rest of your day? Like, that's crazy to me. So I was like, I've got all of this time to go and try all these things and read all these books and do all these hobbies and learn web development and graphic design and software engineering and anything I could get my hands on. And so I just started creating this kind of like jack of all trades mentality of I'm going to get to a pretty good level at everything I can get my hands on until I find the thing that I want to do, because I've never had that opportunity. And then I remember when I was, about 17, 18, I decided what I wanted to do at university because I really wanted to continue doing the history and philosophy style of thinking, but I was really passionate about maths and computer science. And I wanted to find something where I could have a little bit of both. So I went to study philosophy of science at UCL, and it was the only degree at the only university that I was interested in because it did this really specific structure. And I fell in love with logic and linguistics and computer science and problem solving and the history of ideas. And I started doing consultancy work. So I did business strategy consultancy work, working as a freelancer, helping science-based, tech-based and creative companies develop internal and external product narratives and improve like efficiencies while at university. I founded 3 different companies. I founded a charity which helped at-risk children with creative workshops to help solve real-life problems and help them improve access and engagement with education and future employment. And so I was doing all of these different things all of the time. And the common theme for me was I want to walk into any environment where I feel uncomfortable and I want to solve it. I want to make myself feel comfortable and confident in it. And so I would deliberately put myself in the most complicated, difficult positions and just learn how to be calm and just go into it and solve whatever needs to be solved. And so I ended up doing quite successful work while at university and earning quite good money. My attendance at university was absolutely atrocious, but luckily I was very good at taking chocolates and flowers to the administrative office and being very polite to the lovely woman there that was in charge of my attendance. I ended up doing well at university. I got the highest in my year. I got a first class degree, really, and loved the paper that I finally wrote on. I would love to go back and study that more. And so I was at the end of university, and I've been doing all these different things. And one of the main ones was running a media and arts company that helped young and emerging artists, which was the parent company of the charity which did the at-risk children work. And this is where I really found what UnderPinned would be, because I was working with thousands eventually in different kinds of freelancers. I wasn't calling them freelancers then, it was just creatives initially. Initially it was artists. And I was basically helping them build businesses around what they were doing. And it started off, it was just about kind of helping fine artists commercialize their artwork or commercialize their skill set to support their artwork. And then it was graphic designers and illustrators and poets and consultants and web developers and software engineers, and then, business strategy consultants, and then financial advisors. And I remember vividly sitting down with an accountant and going, come on, like, of all the people that should know how to build a business, it's you. Like, why am I the person telling you? Why am I this like weird 21-year-old dude who's done all these things that is telling you how to build a business? And I was sitting down with a 40-year-old accountant who's going freelance. And I realized, I have become an expert in this field without realizing it. And it's not because I am intensely intelligent or any sort of specific attributes of mine, except for just having a wealth of experience with all these different people. But what I realized is that nobody had ever left education or employment with this understanding. And yet there were all these amazing people who had these incredibly commercializable skills and no understanding of how to commercialize it. And so UnderPinned just seemed like the next logical step. So I started UnderPinned 3 months before I technically graduated, but after I'd finished uni. And within 2 months of starting it, managed to find the first 250 grand of investment. So UnderPinned was my first full-time job, which started 2 months before technically I finished university.
Amazing. I'm interested to know when you said that you studied the history of ideas.
Yeah.
And you seem to me like a man whose brain is just firing all the time, and how, like, so, I love the postmodern idea that they say no idea is unique. Everything's been thought of before.
Yeah.
How do you say someone with a mind like yours that's coming up with ideas all of the time to filter these ideas? Because, everyone has great ideas, but how do we filter them into becoming something practical?
This is a great question. I love this question because I have what I think is a good answer. Ideas are useless and worthless and valueless. And until you realize that, you're never going to be successful. And the reason for that is really, really, really simple. Everyone's had an app idea. Everyone's had a business idea. And yes, someone else has probably had it before. Success is not built off the back of good ideas. Success is built off the back of consistent, incremental, hard work, brilliant people, and an access to a market that's interesting, if we're talking about a startup. So the qualities that create success are not intelligence. The qualities that create success are generally experience and hard work. Like any insurmountable task is made up of a series of highly surmountable tiny tasks, right? When you think about something as a whole, it is almost always insurmountable. When you think about something as a sum of a series of tiny parts, it's always very surmountable. One of my best friends and mentor, a guy called Rob Crook, described this to me really beautifully a couple of years ago. And I always credit him because I steal half of what he tells me and tout it as my own. So I feel like I should credit him. He's a senior product manager now at Spotify. But he describes me really nicely. He was like, you have this grid of 100 by 100 tiny squares. And your idea is the one square in the middle, right? Now, if you try and think about what shape it's going to be in the whole thing, you're going to create something that's completely unattainable. But if you start with the one tiny square in the middle and see where the next square might go, and that might be a person you're hiring or a client you're trying to find or a development of the idea, and you slowly build out that shape, the final shape might look nothing like what you originally thought. But the incremental progression of building out this square by square system builds something amazing. So when it comes to like filtering your ideas, I think the most important thing is to realize that the idea itself is not the thing that's valuable. So choosing which one isn't actually necessarily that important. There might be some that are bad and some that are wrong, but fundamentally, it's not really the idea, because the idea is going to change drastically as you focus on it. The thing that's important is to sit down and start this process. And so when people come through our accelerator program, one of the exercises I often get them to do is to say, forget about your profession, forget about the thing that you do. because you've got so many preconceptions about what you do that you've got this big picture that's probably completely wrong. Pretend, if you're a graphic designer, that you're a copywriter, and do all of these business building exercises as if you are a copywriter. And what you'll realize is, because you don't know so much about it, you start with a much smaller thing and you build up much more slowly. And actually you end up building a more successful copywriting business, being someone that's never done copywriting, than you did a graphic design business. And so I think that filtering your ideas is about saying, okay, none of my ideas have value inherently. Which one could I most easily take a first step towards building? And I often say to people, like, one of the really valuable exercises you can do, like the last one, is set yourself your big idea as your vision, but then ignore it and go and set yourself daily, weekly, maximum monthly tasks, highly measurable, highly actionable, incremental tasks that you can work towards things. And the learning that you have on the way is what will build the value for the final product.
It's funny, isn't it? Because like, let's just say a graphic designer, just for instance, but a graphic designer loves designing graphics. But how do they get to the point where they can design graphics and come up with their ideas and enjoy work, but underpin all of those things that go with it? And I guess that's the bit that I've seen successful people do, is that, you know, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be a freelancer, or even start your own business. And I love your thing of like, what you're good at, set it aside up here, but build, underpin. I'm going to like just sell your business, but underpin it with structure. Because like, you know, I think in the 5 years that my life has really, really changed, that has been the thing that I've really focused on, especially with my business, is just making sure the structure, the infrastructure, I suppose the typical ideas of what it takes to set up a business in 2021 and the corporate structures that have been in existence. But I still want to be progressive. And I want to be a company that doesn't look like other companies. I want to be a company that is ethically balanced with, you know, shares and letting people all feel part of stuff. But the lessons that I've learned is that you can be really super altruistic with your ideas, but the systems that we are in don't necessarily enable a company like that to be as progressive as I would wish. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but can we still be really progressive with our ideas and altruistic values that don't necessarily fit within the corporate structures that exist today? I suppose we would say it is the patriarchy, right? The established patriarchy and the white privileged boardrooms, you know, that dictate the systems that we operate in. How do we come up with these beautiful ideas for companies that want to destabilize that yet have to fit in it? Whew.
Yeah. So inclusion, diversity, and access to opportunity as a theme is something that I'm very passionate about and spend a lot of time working in. And in fact, the reason that we met is that I sponsored that investment event, which actually there's another one this week, which I sponsor on the basis of trying to help them create a more inclusive environment to access capital for early stage founders. And like, this is another great example of, okay, if we want to create more inclusive businesses, we need to have a more inclusive and diverse range of people who are having input into businesses, yet the access to capital requires access to middle-aged to older white dudes because they're the guys with money. And in order to access them, you need to kind of look or act or be associated with them in some way, which means you're more likely to be a relatively wealthy white dude. And so what you then have is like a system that makes it very difficult to create the diversity and inclusion required to change the infrastructure itself, right? So there are areas where this is developing faster and slower. And one of the things that I'm really interested about with freelancing is that it is one of the unique formats of work that is work first. When you interview someone for a full-time position, it is people first. The first thing that you're looking at, the thing that you're focused on is the individual. Whereas when you are hiring a freelancer, the first thing you are focused on is the work. Now, the continuation of your relationship with them might be person focused, but the initial interaction is very much around the work and the requirement of the specific job. So there's an opportunity to create diversity. And we've been, I guess, in some ways fortunate, in some ways hardworking towards creating a very diverse community within UnderPinned. But the real difficulty for me is not about creating diversity at the grassroots level. The difficulty is, as you're describing, how do you create diversity at the senior level, at the corporate governance level where that diversity and experience in the diverse experience doesn't exist. And I don't know what the answer to that question is. If I did, I'm sure I'd be much more successful than I am. But I think that there are probably two parts to it, or two parts that I think are particularly important. One is the understanding and acceptance and acknowledgement of privilege. Now, that I think is very different to the prescription of a deficit of it. So rather than saying, as a successful white man, I'm not going to say, this is why I wouldn't be successful if I wasn't white, but rather identifying the aspects of my career that have been easier for me because of my circumstance. And I think it's very important to never be prescriptive to other people's experiences if you haven't experienced them, but that doesn't mean you can't recognize how you yourself are privileged. So I think creating a better recognition of privilege is one part. The second part, which I think is really, really undervalued, is the platforming of people via that privilege. So if you are in a position of privilege, it is not your place to speak out for other people. It is your place to recognize your own privilege. It is not your place to speak out on behalf of other people. But you can be a tannoy, you can be a conduit through which you can platform other people. And one of the phenomena I've noticed that's really interesting is I did a campaign on LinkedIn around inclusion and diversity. And there's a bunch of pictures of me wearing a dress as part of this campaign. And I received thousands and thousands of interactions with it. I received two negative comments, both of which were quite well written and quite nicely put, despite being horribly unethical. And I saw an equivalent campaign posted by a woman, which was far less outspoken and received torrents of abuse. And this is really interesting because the platform that I have allowed for a more meaningful conversation with people whose opinions needed to be changed in a format they were willing to listen to. And the value of that bridging between the worlds, as it were, cannot be undervalued in a fight for inclusion and diversity. So I think that the role that white men particularly need to play is one of understanding privilege and acting as a bridge to access worlds for people whose voices are more important than ours. And I think that's an exciting opportunity and a very difficult one to navigate.
And one I feel that you and I, for some reason, are going to I'm going to try to work with you on that, because I don't know if we had a chance to talk about like Tough and Tender, which is this program that we're developing, which is being designed. It's being designed to help all people really kind of understand the last 30 to 50 years of our evolution, particularly in the sports world, sports culture, which is all these ideas of what real men should and look and act like. And it's really about questioning it all. And we live in a world right now that wants to divide us. You know, you're either a vaxxer or anti-vaxxer, or Trump or anti-Trump, or conservative or liberal, and it's always division. Because you believe a certain thing, I've got to hate you, rather than this thing of like, hey, you know what? Why can't we talk? And this is all about creating safe spaces for people to be able to talk and without judgment and with a level of understanding. And that's what I think guys who sit in privileged positions like you and I need to do, is create the spaces to talk and also listen.
This is really exciting, and I'm really excited to hear more about it. But this plays on a really interesting kind of concept that I've thought about since I was like 10 years old. But I've always been really good at arguing with people. I've always been really good at convincing people of things. And I've always been really good at selling shit. And it's all based on a very simple idea, which is that I don't ever disagree with anyone. And the reason for that is, if you're having an argument with someone, the way that you win an argument is not by disagreeing with the person, because no one ever turns around and goes, you know what, I'm just going to agree with you now. What you do is you show where you agree. You find the areas from which you actually have a common understanding, and you build upon those to create a bridge of understanding. Like telling somebody, nobody thinks anything unreasonably. And what I mean by that is the most racist ideas, the most homophobic ideas, the most aggressive prejudice ideas are born out of, and bear with me, sensible inputs, as in you don't think something, obviously, that you disagree with, which means there is a basis for your agreement with your own idea. And in order to help people be more inclusive, in order to help people be part of a conversation, you cannot come into a conversation with a stance of being negative, of being dichotomous. You need to come into the conversation by saying, you know what? I can't understand why you think that, but I want to understand why you think that. And once I understand why you think that, it might actually be that we agree about a lot more than I thought. It's just you have a totally different context and framework of understanding. The paper that I wrote, my dissertation, was on an idea that I created called around structural realism, and how it was actually called perspectival structuralism. But the basic foundation of it was this: truth is relative to context. Like that's like the foundation of it, right? And so unless you understand the context of an idea, you have no basis for having a conversation about the truth of what they're saying, right? Because the truth is based on an understanding of a series of bits of experience, etc. And so what you're talking about is really exciting to me, because this is the basis of saying, okay, we live in a world where people have different opinions, rather than conversations around different contexts. And if you start to have that conversation, the end product is less important at the beginning of the conversation. And that's a really exciting way to approach things.
Yeah, I think that it is exciting that when we can be in spaces just to, like as you're talking about, the word perspective just comes into mind. Perspective, frequency. There was a time when I would listen to someone like Russell Brand and I didn't get it. I just didn't understand. And then something happened in my life and it's like the frequency changed. And then I started to understand more what he was saying. And then another time a frequency changed a little bit. So my perspective changed along the time, where I had differing opinions on someone like Russell Brand, where I didn't get it, I liked it, and then I didn't get it, and I don't like it. So all these things, and it was all me doing work on myself to change my perspective so that I could help to see the truth, which is that my truth, there's multiple truths to things, and that the truth that I'm coming with isn't I don't have to own it, and it doesn't have to be part of me.
So I think this is a really interesting point, and I'm cautious of your use of the word truth, because I think that we see a lot in popular culture and popular news and like general layperson media, that there is this idea of truth is relative, which I don't think is true. I don't think truth is relative. What I do think is there are contexts that can be set up which allow for a more meaningful discussion about something that is hard to define as objective. And like a great example, like a high level physics example of this, is like theory of relativity versus quantum physics. Like they don't work together. They are impossible for both of them to be true at the same time within the same context, which is why it is required that when talking about theory of relativity, you're talking about things at a macro scale where they are close enough experientially and in terms of data for it to be accurate. And similarly on a quantum level, you couldn't talk about the theory of relativity at a quantum level meaningfully. And so in that sense, there is a sense of relativity and truth, but it's very context defined. What I think you can't do is talk about, let's say something, if you take something like vaccine or anti-vaccine. I'm not going to state an opinion in this, but the point being, the idea that you can set your own context for the conversation is fallacious. The context within society exists. You might only have a part of it, but that doesn't make your truth as valid as something with a wider context. And I think that's really important. It's also this view of undermining the role of expertise in modern society, where we undermine experts because we have an opinion, which is fine for us to have an opinion and great, but it is highly fallacious to think that we have the same level of context as somebody who's been studying this for 20 years.
Yeah. Albert, I want to continue our conversation about truth. But we've run out of time. But and that's the thing, right? Is that this is about a conversation, and my journey in not being able to see the truth, me having to go through certain exercises of writing stuff down, of of looking at completely, things that I've done and things where I was wrong, to let me know that the truth that I was seeing then wasn't the real truth. Mm-hmm. And that there's capital T truth and small t truth, and the human construct of truths in mathematics and science has got to always be taken into account as well. Anyway. let's set up a date.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's a lot more that we're working on, some stuff that we want to launch in September that I want to talk to you about, because it's going to be really super cool. And we just got to set up a date to meet up. So I wanted to do this with you because I was really excited, but I wanted us to be able to get some time together to talk. And I know that the people at the in Southwark will really benefit from the stuff that you've said today. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what would you say is the best way to get in touch with you?
You can straight up email me at albert@underpinned.com. I will try and reply in as timely a manner as humanly possible. But more broadly, check out Underpinned, type in Underpinned to any of the social medias or Googles of the world, and you'll find us very quickly. But yeah, if you're interested in freelancing or entrepreneurialism, do get in touch.
Do get in touch with this guy, because he's got it all. Albert, thank you so much. And let's I think first week of September, let's try to get something together. Okay.
Yeah, I actually think that can work now as well. So I'll ping you an email straight to this.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks everybody at the What's on at Elephant and Castle community. And don't forget, on Thursday at 11 a.m. I'll be running a Tough and Tender workshop. So we'll see you then. Thanks everybody.
All right, bye.